Hey folks, and welcome to a Broken Meeple review, probably the darkest Broken Meeple review ever. And I'm not talking about the lighting, I'm talking about the subject matter. This is a dark game, but is it a good one? Whoop, here we go. This War of Mine. Now this isn't anything brand new, some of you have probably already seen this before. But I finally decided to get a review copy of this from Awaken Realms and their, I think is it Galacta, their distributor. And they were even kind enough to send me the expansion for the game as well. So this is going to be a kind of double review. Mainly for the base game as a whole, and also just to let you know what's in the expansion and whether the expansion's worth getting. But this War of Mine, whew. Awaken Realms has kind of made a name for themselves lately, haven't they? With the whole Kickstarter craze. Like, whenever they do Kickstarter, it's like, move over, cool mini or not, we now have Awaken Realms. Because they do some very good Kickstarters. They got a lot of content in them, they're expensive as all get out, but they're producing some interesting looking stuff. Quality stuff remains to be seen, because I only have this and Nemesis to go on at the moment. I've backed Tainted Grail, and I've backed Ether Fields, but then, do I know if they're any good or not? I have no idea whatsoever. But like I say, Awaken Realms are starting to, put themselves on the map for me. Now the reason I wanted to get into this game was because I have dabbled with the computer game. Not very much. I've played, like a few missions in it, and mostly failed. In fact, failed them all. And the idea is that this is a very dark and gritty game. You are in a war, I forget where it is, I think it's in Poland it's meant to be, but I could be wrong on that. Where does it say? Or is it even a fictional area? I don't know. But essentially, you are civilians in this war. You're not a soldier. You're not like a badass, like kung fu fighter or anything. You are just civilians trying to survive. And it's taking you through this highly thematic story with your characters having to just survive. Just not fall into misery, just not die from wounds, just not get ill, not like get pneumonia from the cold or anything like that. It's trying to make you survive through it, and you've got to collect food supplies, you've got to scavenge for water and and materials, components, so that you can build furniture and stuff around your shelter. Can you board up the windows? A weapon, a knife, so that you can fight off thugs at night. And basic heater so you can stay warm. It is very much survival. And one thing about it is that it's a word of warning to people who want to play this game. I'm fine with it because I can switch myself off from reality and realize it's only a game. But this is gritty. This is dark. You are essentially playing through these characters, but there is a book of scripts that you read, and it gives you a nice story narrative. And it is taking you through the dark side of war. The dark side of war. I mean, I don't want to spoil too much in it, but there was one part where you walk around a house and under the floorboards you hear like some voices, and you lift up the floorboards and it's a politician guy who might have been responsible or partly responsible for the war starting in the first place. He's been hiding out, and you are given a choice, and it's almost a bit like choose your own adventure at times, and you have a choice. Do you just leave him there? Do you help him out, or do you call the rebels, like the resistance, and let them deal with them? And, you choose one of those options, and you end up having the guy basically tortured in the middle of public square as a kind of sign to, we hate this war, this is what happens. It's like, wow, okay. And then basically what you are doing on a regular basis is you are scavenging for supplies, potentially of other civilians who are trying to survive. You might go to a hospital and you go there and you're scavenging medical supplies. Well, you're doing it from patients. These are from people who need the supplies, and you're stealing from them. You might go into a supermarket and you find some residents, and it will say, like, if you steal from anything in the private area of this, you will potentially start a fight with these people. You steal anyway. You decide, right, I'm going to steal this game. This game. I'm going to steal this food. Forget them. Or they get into a fight and you're forced to kill them, even though you've suffered some wounds yourself. If you're the sort of person that could get not agitated, but, hurt or feel a bit unsettled by that kind of thing, then maybe you should steer away from this, because it definitely does go down a dark path. It's I say it's a depressing game. It's fun. Alright, I'll get onto that later, but this is definitely a depressing mood game. You are not supposed to be laughing out loud in this game. You are not supposed to be all jolly, jolly, jolly. It's definitely very serious. It kind of leaves you it can leave you in a bit of a state, a bit like watching the Black Mirror episodes that I've been doing lately. You know, you get to the end and it's like, wow, that was dark. Here, it can have the same approach. Sometimes I feel a little bit more in a computer game, but I'm not trying to compare the two here. They both play out pretty much the same with just a few rules tweaks for this version. But just want to get that out there. This is an 18+ rated game for a reason, okay? But that being said, if you're fine with that, wow, is this a thematic game? Whoo-wee. As you could probably tell just from the way I was explaining those stories, but yeah, the theme is super, super strong in here. It is dripping off this game. The book of scripts take you into this world. The fact that you're surviving for the bare essentials just to stay alive. Like you come in one night and you're going hungry because you can't even find just a tin of sardines or something to keep you going. And then you hammer some nails and that together and build yourself a bed. Something as simple as a bed, just so that, Nina in your group can sleep and just recover her fatigue and, give me some herbal meds that might heal my disease. There is a lot of theme here. The Book of Scripts does a good job of doing this, and if you don't like flicking through the book, there is an app, which I must admit I have not tried. I hear the app is good, it kind of saves you having to flick through the book at the Book of Scripts, but to be honest, I'm happy just to flick through the book. It doesn't really bother me too much, but it's up to you. There is an app option if you want it. But those story elements, what you're doing in the game, fully 100% thematic. The same feeling from the computer game I get in this at top marks for that. You want a rating just for theme, 10 out of 10. Straight up. It is just oozing from this. Now the gameplay itself is quite long. It can take a long time to play through this game, particularly if you play the normal basic scenario, which is going from start to finish with about sort of 10 to 12 rounds, I can't remember, but it's a long game. However, despite that, it has a good save feature. You basically play it, you've got stuff all over the place, and then there's a pad that you can write down what is on what space, what fittings you've got, what health everyone's on. You can save it, you could put the game away, and then you could just put everything into a bag, and then take them out, put it together if you wanted to bring it to another game night. Or you could just leave it set up on the table and resume it later. So it is very easy to pick points, like at the start of a new round, to say, right, we're done for the night, okay, save it, go. Great. Because this game can take you hours to play. I mean, playing solo could still take you a good 90 minutes to 2 hours to finish a small scenario. It takes easily 3+ hours to do a normal game of this. It's a long, involved game. But you are engaged throughout if you're playing by yourself and maybe with one other person. This game goes up to 6 players.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
What were you thinking? Seriously. Seriously. Smack the designer. This is not a 1 to 6 player game. This is barely a 1 to 3 player game. And 3 is pushing it. If you've got 3 very fast players, or you just happen to be a group of 3 and you want to play this, then maybe 3. But really, this is a 1 or 2 player max game. 2 of you could probably get through this reasonably quickly. You make decisions between the 2 of you and you go from there. But 3 and more players, you start noticing the downtime is ridiculous. This journal book, which I'll get onto a bit more later, allows you to sort of switch from player to player, but it's really not enough. Especially when you're reading scripts and that, you just feel that the game will drag on endlessly with lots of players. Big flaw. But this isn't a game I intend to play with a lot of players. I'll play it with 2 players maybe, and 3 at a push. But predominantly, I'm playing this solo.
This is why Superman works alone.
And as a solo game, great. It works perfectly as a solo game, and I think if you go on the community on Board Game, it actually says where it says 1 to 6 players. It says like 1 to 3 by the community, and then it says best 1. So BGG agree with me on this, okay? This is not just my opinion. Solo is definitely the way to play this game. So if you are, like me, an avid solo player of games, definitely look into this. But I've mentioned theme, mentioned the time length. It's long, but you can save it. Components and artwork, really, really good. You've got some cool miniatures of the various characters, and you've got artwork that is straight up lifted from the computer game. I don't know whether they just straight up ported it or like transferred it, whatever, or actually redrew it and just got it to look exactly like it. But the artwork is as it appears in the game. Dark, gritty. You recognize certain like pictures from the game itself, like the flashlight in your face, with like, oh, you've been raided. And you know, you've got this board that's huge. Warning, this is a table hog, and there's a lot of cards to set up, so it's got a bit of a lengthy setup time, but you do have a game tray for the components, which is okay, but if you can come up with your own system for how to store and, you know, catalog this game, probably works out a bit better. But yeah, artwork, beautiful. In a dark, gritty way. You know, you've got this big house shelter on the board, you've got double-sided boards, so you can play the hard version, as if it's not hard enough already, and the normal version, and it just looks like this gorgeous looking house with all the rooms, rubble, you know, the cards everywhere, you know, and the artwork on them is sometimes basic in terms of what it's showing, but it's just very nicely laid out, very nicely written and clear to understand. But you got a lot of cards. You got a lot of piles, you got a lot of shuffling to do. Recommend sleeving this game if you can help it, especially some of those decks that you've got to shuffle constantly when you're going out and scavenging. But, as I say, even got like black and white Polaroids of various characters. Pretty much, if you are a fan of the computer game, this looks like the computer game and does a fantastic job of representing it in a tabletop form. Should you buy this if you've got the computer game? That's a decision for you guys. I mean, I play this fine. I've got the computer game. I'll play either or. There are some rule differences. You might prefer one to the other for that, but I'm not trying to say, oh, put away this computer game version or don't bother with this because you have the computer game. That's your decision to make. Some of you don't have a PC, so you're going to have this. Some of you don't play board games. You're going to have, if you don't, why the hell are you watching this video? But, you know, it's kind of like that. The difficulty of this game is definitely hard, though. I mean, whew. You want a hard challenge? This will do you nicely because it's not easy. I mean, you can get hosed over by luck at times, and that can be a little bit of a pain, but then you have to accept that there's a bit of luck involved with drawing cards and rolling a die, and they're not easy challenges. So this isn't a game that you must play if you think you're a strategic level player and you want no luck. No, luck could hose you in this game if you're not careful, or even if you are careful, luck could still hose you. But it adds to that tension. It adds to the fact that this is a war scenario. You are not designed or built to survive this war. Everything is putting you on the back foot. You are constantly you rarely feel like you're in a position where it's like, I've got this, we're good. I've got all the food and water in the world, everything will be fine. And then you get raided by thugs who nick all your stuff or kill off one of your characters. It can happen. It has happened. You've got to be ready for this. You cannot get complacent with this game because the second you do, the game learns from this somehow and basically smacks you in the face for getting cocky. It does happen. I've had it happen when I thought I had all the food in the world and then I got raided, didn't do too well on the retaliation. It's like, damn. You know, it's like, it does happen. But again, that's thematic and it works. In terms of the complexity, there's a fair amount to learn. It's not the easiest game to get into straight away, but there is one way this game very cleverly does as an advantage. The journal I mentioned earlier. It not only acts as a setup guide, but it also acts as a learn to play rulebook. You basically can just set up the game via the journal and then not read any rulebooks. I mean, the rulebook is basically some FAQ in the book of scripts, which is not ideal. It's kind of scattered all over the place and I find it a bit hard to reference that at times. You know, that could have been laid out a lot better, maybe in a separate book. But the journal has had a hit and miss reception with people, but I personally think it's a good way of doing learn to play. Because I thought, oh my God, this is going to take me forever to learn. And granted, there's a bit of the occasional rule I have to reference every now and again, but the journal is a great way to go, right, start off, draw an event card, read it, resolve it. Now, after you've done that, move on to day. You now get to do actions. Here are the actions you can do. Go do it. Then it's like, now you've moved on to the dusk phase. You must pay 2 water. You must eat 2 food. Otherwise, do this. Now you have a choice to scavenge. If you scavenge, do this. And it's like, it tells you exactly what to do without you having to read the rulebook in advance. You basically just get into the game and get started. Now, granted, your first game is going to take you a long time, assuming you survive long enough to tell the story. But I found that journal to be great. I would like a lot of games to do that. I think it worked really, really well. Granted, it's not to everyone's taste. Some people just want a proper rulebook. But personally, I think it made my life a lot easier to get into this game and just sort of slowly build myself up to a point where I'm like, I'm comfortable, I can deal with this. Wow, this is actually getting really good. You know, it made a lot of difference to my enjoyment. As I said, it's hard, but wonderfully thematic. You know, there's a fair amount to learn. You have got 2 other scenarios in here as well, which I actually recommend you use them more often than the base game because the scenarios are actually shorter. They're designed to be slightly harder in difficulty, but not any much more harder than the normal game is. But they are shorter because you have less event cards. And those event cards are basically like the timer for the game. You have to last until you get to the bottom of that deck. So I actually prefer the scenarios, but you do only get 2. But of course, you can just play the main game and save it at various points and it will work just fine. So, like I say, I've talked a lot about this and I haven't even got onto the expansion yet, but this War of Mine, it surprised me as a computer game. I think this is about as perfect a representation of that computer game as you will ever get. Even with a couple of rules tweaks, which, to be honest, I prefer the rules tweaks in this. The computer game, you can only have one person scavenge all the time. Here, you can have multiple characters scavenge if you really want. Of course, you have to leave someone on guard duty. You don't desperately, I think, have to do that in a computer game. I don't know, which is a bit of a hindrance, but then it adds to the, the thematic nature of the game. You have to leave your shelter guarded, otherwise you just get raided and die. It's like obvious. I mean, come on, you're in a war zone here. But it's got some rules tweaks I actually prefer to the computer game, even though the computer game does have that cool mini game where you go out and scavenge and you're trying to sneak around and do all this cool stuff. You don't get that here as much. But you do have a deck of cards that you go through and you decide, you come across a jammed door, a locked basement, you're rolling for noise. You've come across some residents. Are they thugs? Are they hobos? Are they civilians? Did you find an army squad? Have you got to fight your way out? Can you talk your way out? Do you just trade with them? Look, I'm not here to steal your stuff, but I desperately need some meds. Do you have meds? All right, I'll give you all this stuff. Here's some jewelry. You want jewelry? Great, give me that food. It's brilliant the way the story tells itself. Every story, every game will turn out differently. So, as a solo game, I think this is fantastic. As a multiplayer game, it's lacking because of the downtime, the length of time it takes. Just is no need to play this with more than ideally 2 players, but if you want to play it with 3, fine, go ahead and play it with 3. But it looks great. The artwork is straight up for the game. The rules are easier to learn than it should be because of that journal. The book of scripts and what you're doing in the game is wonderfully thematic. You have multiple characters to pick from. You have 2 extra scenarios in the box. The normal game will easily give you enough replay value in the box, even if it would have been nice to have maybe more cards in the things like exploration deck and stuff. Because that exploration deck, you're going to see pretty much everything in it anyway. The fittings and stuff though, the furniture you can build, that's going to be different each game, although there's definitely some furniture that's better than others. I mean, the radio is kind of never ever built. It's just a pretty lackluster item. However, you try to go through this game without either boarding up your house fully or a simple heater, good luck. I hope you like hypothermia, because it's going to screw you over right royally if you don't. So, a bit of a balance issue here and there with some cards being blatantly more useful than others. There's a luck aspect, it is long, but these are minor nitpicks that I have with what is otherwise a really, really cool game. I just wish maybe they'd given you more scenarios in the box and maybe just sort of tweaked that balance system a little bit. But overall, this War of Mine, if you're happy with that gritty theme, gets a solid 9 out of 10 for me. It is a highly entertaining, particularly as a solo game. Probably a 7 or 8 if you're playing this with too many players, but I think as a solo game, this is a fantastic purchase if you are comfortable with the dark and gritty theme, which I am, because personally I quite like this as a refreshing change of pace. A nice, where everything isn't all lovey-dovey and like, oh yeah, everything's perfect, I have all the weapons and stuff. No, you are just Joe Bloggs with a guitar and you gotta survive. I like this style of game. It's really, really cool. Gotta admit, love it. 9, this War of Mine. Now, very quickly, I just want to talk about the expansion. Tales from the Ruined City. Now, this is a pretty straightforward expansion. A bit overpriced for what you get in it, though, I must admit. But if you can get it cheap or on Ding and Dent or something, then it's definitely worth looking into for part of it. It essentially is a modular expansion, and I'm reminding myself on the back here, but it gives you a new book of scripts which are designed to work with the scenarios in here. It gives you scenarios, I think at least 5 different scenarios similar to the short ones from the base game. It gives you a sewers mechanic which allows you to go and do more stuff during the scavenge phase. that I'm not as big of a fan of. I mean, it's a bit too complex to work in. It elongates the game even more. That's a mechanic, or sorry, a module that I'm not a fan of using at all. So that pretty much just sits in the bag. The farmers module gives you another way to trade after the scavenging phase, I think, and I think it's around there. But basically, it's like, you know, how you interact with that market will have recurring effects. You know, do you steal from them? Do you trade with them? Do you like get into fights? Do they come for you? It's a cool little module, but it's not compatible with all the the basic scenarios. I think it's better to play the farmers module if you're just doing the normal game without any of the weird setup rules, because I have had 1 or 2 occasions where they clashed. You know, it's like, you know, you start off with these 2 fittings and replace a fitting that you've already placed. Well, hang on, in this scenario I don't have any fittings. So does it add on? Do I replace? You're going to end up with some of these FAQ moments. But the farmers is fine. The only thing I find is that it makes the game a bit easier, which is good. If you want the game to be a bit easier, throw in the farmers module and it generally does make it a bit easier. But then you might find it makes it too easy, in which case you might have to play the game on hard mode to compensate. It's a half decent module, but it's not one that I feel I'm going to use as often. And the main reason for that is because the main reason you should get this expansion, if you have the money to pay for it, is the other scenarios. Those 2 short scenarios in the other game are great because it's shorter, but it's still thematic and it gives you that experience in a shorter time frame, whilst giving you a different style of play. This gives you 5 very different scenarios. I mean, I just played one last night, in fact, and it was called You and Me. And basically you control these 2 different characters who have met each other. They're sort of developing a bond. They can't, for now, they're not girlfriend, boyfriend yet. They've met each other in the war and they're just connected. And you're trying to survive this war with just the 2 of you. You've got a bare chance you might get a 3rd person in your group, but mainly it's just you 2. And it's hard to play through the game with just 2 of you because you've got to leave 1 person on guard duty. 1 person needs to scavenge, but if you don't sleep, you get tired. So it's a tricky scenario. But the theme with it, like how if something happens to the other player, it affects the other one, and it's just a very different style of play. But then there's other ones. You've got can I tell from the back? I'm trying to remember which ones. You've got one where you're like an epidemic, so it's a hospital breakout. It's got some really cool. One about refugees. You know, like refugees, you're coming across different people. You're going to interact with them, but each of them has very different setup changes, different styles of play. Sort of similar objectives to what the other ones is, but it might have a different way for you to get there. I mean, playing this game when you're controlling 4 characters is a lot different than controlling it when you've only got 2. But it just adds a different story element. It's like Robinson Crusoe. You play through those scenarios. One time you're building up a campfire, the next you're defending yourself from cannibals, the next you're Swiss Family Robinson. It's the same game, but how you play it and the setup and objectives is very different. This is the same deal. And the scenarios are worth the price of the expansion alone, I think. You've got a couple of other little mini things like a cat that you can throw in, 1 extra character, and a couple of other little minor things. And it's like, to be honest, they're pretty minor, I must admit. I mean, you can throw them in if you like, and the sewers I'm never going to use. The farmers I will throw in occasionally, so really all you're getting from this is the farmers and those scenarios. But their scenarios are good. I mean, if you get this, you have 7 scenarios to use. You need never play the basic version of the game again. You just play those 7 scenarios and it will keep you going for life. You will not get bored. And as a bonus, you have these envelopes in the box where if you complete a scenario and succeed, you actually get to open the envelope and it gives you something to add to the game to add a bit more variety. They might even make your life easier in respects. It's basically more stuff to decks mainly, but it's cool that you have that. You have an incentive. It's like, oh, we failed. Well, we can't open the envelope. We'll try again next time. But the You and Me scenario I played last night, I succeeded. So I got to open up the envelope and it's like, oh, cool. It's nothing like groundbreaking. It's not like Pandemic Legacy here, but it's like, cool. I'll add those to those decks. It'll be cool if they come up. It adds more content as an incentive of you playing it and getting a reward. It's just a nice little touch. As I say, the expansion itself, I probably could only give as high as a 7 because I find that for the price you're paying for it, because I don't think you find it that cheap these days, it's kind of like a lot of it is situational. Like I say, I'll never use the sewers, the farmers I'll use every now and again. That book of script is great if you are playing the scenarios that use stuff from it. But again, more narrative is always a good thing, and it's not like you are short of that in the normal game. But like I say, more content is nice. It's really more about the extra scenarios though. If that's all you want, just more ways to play the game, then you can grab this expansion and have a good time with it. But if you're looking for value for money, it's hit and miss. But still, if you are a fan of this War of Mine and you just want more scenarios and that's all you care about, then by all means, group together and buy this expansion, because I think you will enjoy the scenarios in here. So far, I've obviously not played all 5 of them, but I've played 2 of them, and I've added the other scenarios into a base game. And like I say, the scenarios are definitely my favorite aspect. You and me is, I think 5, 6 events tops, compared to what, like twice that nearly for the main game. You're playing a game of half the length of the normal game, but it's still hard, still plenty to do, and still wonderfully thematic. It's great. I love these scenarios. So, Tales from the Ruined City. If you're going to bring out another expansion for this in the future, Awaken Realms, then just stick to scenarios. I say, just give me more scenarios, more characters, or bump up those decks with more cards that you can use in every game. That's all I really want. I don't need extra weird mechanics to throw in. Just give me more of the good stuff. That's what good expansions are usually all about. So, this War of Mine, the board game. 9 for the actual main game. It came very close to a 10 though, I must admit, but a few little flaws here and there push it back down to a 9. That's not exactly massive negativity though. Come on, the game is fantastic. 7 for the expansion. Could be better. I was expecting maybe a bit more value from it, but the scenarios in it, if you have the money, are worth the price of admission. So this War of Mine, the board game, dark, gritty, but great fun, wonderfully thematic. If like me, theme is your thing, then you definitely need to give it a look. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and regardless of whether you have died from dysentery, starved to death, fallen ill, killed civilians, stolen from old people. Like I say, this is a dark and gritty game, okay? Regardless if you've done any of those things, just remember, as much as it is dark and gritty, it's still only a game. So eventually, you'll switch back to reality and all will be well. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Remember to click subscribe if you like the content, and take care.